September 29, 1918, 5:50 a.m. The British general stared at John Monash as if he had gone completely mad. 4 hours? You are saying you will smash through the Hindenburg Line in 4 hours? Monash did not hesitate. Yes, sir, 4 hours, General. We have been trying to break that fortress for 2 years. We have lost tens of thousands of men. The French have failed. The Americans have failed. And you are telling me your Australians will do it in one morning? Monash laid out a detailed map covered in pencil markings, timing notes, and coordinate grids. Not just a breakthrough, sir. We will be 5 miles beyond it by lunchtime. The British officer shook his head and walked out. Another colonial officer making impossible promises. But what happened on September 29, 1918 would haunt that officer for the rest of his career, because Monash was not boasting. He was stating a fact. The Hindenburg Line was Germany's ultimate safeguard. After years of brutal trench warfare, German engineers created an enormous defensive system stretching more than 100 miles across France. Imagine medieval castle architecture combined with an industrial-age killing machine. There were multiple trench systems, reinforced concrete bunkers, and machine gun nests arranged so their fire overlapped, making it impossible to attack one position without being targeted by several others. Barbed wire was laid so densely it blocked visibility, and behind these defenses lay the St Quentin Canal, essentially a water-filled moat up to 50 feet wide in places. The British had hurled everything at it, massive artillery bombardments lasting days, infantry assaults involving thousands, experimental tactics. None of it worked. Men died in the thousands for advances measured in yards, and still the Hindenburg Line held firm. Some British generals privately believed it could not be broken, and that Germany could only be defeated by waiting for its economy to collapse from exhaustion. Then came John Monash. He was not a typical general. He was Jewish in an army dominated by Anglican aristocrats. He was a colonial officer in a system where influence belonged to the British elite. Before the war, he had worked as a civil engineer constructing bridges and power stations in Melbourne. Many in the British officer class looked down on him. He had no military academy pedigree, no aristocratic lineage, just an Australian professional turned soldier. Monash possessed, however, was something many British generals lacked. He thought like an engineer rather than a romantic. When he studied the Hindenburg Line, he did not see an invincible fortress demanding heroic sacrifice. He saw a complex problem with variables that could be calculated and solved. His preparation was meticulous. While British commanders planned operations over drinks in comfortable headquarters, Monash examined aerial photographs with magnifying glasses, interviewed junior officers who had tested German defenses, and calculated precisely how fast artillery needed to advance to stay ahead of infantry. He constructed full-scale replicas of German trenches behind Australian lines and had his troops rehearse the assault repeatedly, not once or twice, but dozens of times, until every private understood exactly where to be and when to be there. Monash also broke sharply from British tradition by explaining the entire plan to all his soldiers, not just officers. Every man understood the objective and the reasoning behind it. British doctrine treated soldiers like expendable ammunition. Point them at the enemy and send them forward without burdening them with strategy. Monash believed the opposite. He told his men, "This is what we are doing. This is why this is your role when things go wrong," and they will think and adapt. Many British officers were appalled. They believed common soldiers should not be told the bigger picture, fearing panic or hesitation. Monash remained confident. His soldiers would not panic. They would improvise at 5:50 a.m. On September 29, 1918, the battlefield erupted. 1,600 artillery guns fired at once. The sound was so immense that observers 20 miles away thought an earthquake had struck. Yet this was not the prolonged bombardment favored by the British. Monash ordered a short, intense, and precisely timed barrage. The creeping fire advanced 100 yards. Every 3 minutes fast enough to trap German defenders, yet slow enough for Australian infantry to keep up. The Australians moved forward in waves, and their rehearsals proved decisive. When the first wave encountered gaps in the German wire, they marked them for following troops instead of clustering together when a machine gun nest delayed one unit. Another maneuvered around it without waiting for orders because they understood the mission was to keep moving forward, not to eliminate every enemy position. When tanks failed as many, the infantry continued because they knew the plan did not depend entirely on armored support. German defenders fought fiercely. They were experienced troops holding prepared positions, yet they had never encountered such coordination. The artillery was devastatingly accurate, and the infantry highly synchronized. Each time German soldiers emerged to operate their machine guns, Australians were already upon them. Strong points meant to resist for hours fell within minutes. By 7:00 a.m., only 70 minutes into the attack, Australian forces reached the St Quentin Canal. This obstacle was expected to stop any advance. British planners believed bridging equipment would require days to deploy. Monash had anticipated this. Tanks carried fascines, massive bundles of wood, dropped into trenches to form instant crossings. Others transported cribs, metal frames, packed with brushwood that could be thrown into the canal. Some soldiers located shallow sections and waded across under fire. German machine gunners on the opposite bank fired frantically, but were overwhelmed by the scale and coordination of the assault. Within 30 minutes, Australians secured bridgeheads on the far side. The Hindenburg Line had been breached by 9:30 a.m. Just 3 hours and 40 minutes after the assault began, it was finished. The Australian 3rd and 5th Divisions had completely broken through the German defenses, advanced more than 3 miles, captured 4,000 prisoners, and seized 76 artillery guns. Australian casualties were about 1,200. By comparison, British assaults on the same defenses had suffered 10 to 20,000 casualties for smaller gains. German reaction revealed the magnitude of the event. Within days, General Ludendorff, effectively Germany's supreme commander, suffered a nervous collapse and was removed from his post. The Hindenburg Line had been Germany's psychological anchor, the fallback shield they believed could never fail. Its destruction in a single morning shattered morale. German reports soon described mass desertions, units refusing combat, and officers openly discussing surrender. On October 3rd, Germany formally requested an armistice. A war expected to continue into 1919 suddenly seemed close to ending within weeks. The aftermath was complicated. British military leaders responded with both gratitude and resentment. Strategically, they welcomed the breakthrough, which opened possibilities they once considered unattainable psychologically. However, it was devastating. For 2 years they had insisted enormous casualties were unavoidable, and that breaking German defenses demanded vast sacrifice. The Australians had demonstrated that careful planning could achieve success with comparatively limited losses. This reality cast doubt on the competence of generals who had ordered repeated frontal assaults. Some attempted to diminish the Australian achievement. Claims circulated that German forces in that sector were already demoralized, that the Australians were fortunate, or that the defenses there were weaker. None of these claims were supported by evidence, but they helped British officers avoid confronting flaws in their own doctrine. There is a sharp irony in this story. Monash's methods, detailed planning, integration of infantry, artillery, tanks, and aircraft, transparent communication, and mission-focused tactics later became standard practice in modern militaries. Around the world, armies studied his approach. The Germans in particular examined Australian tactics. At the Hindenburg Line, which later influenced the development of blitzkrieg in the 1930s. In 1918, however, British military culture struggled to accept that a colonial engineer without elite training had solved challenges their most respected leaders could not. The human cost must also be acknowledged. Australian losses, though relatively light by Western Front standards still meant 1,200 killed, wounded, or missing. 1,200 families received devastating telegrams. 1,200. Lives were ended or permanently altered. On the German side, thousands died defending positions they understood, or likely lost obeying orders. Because discipline required it, the broader truth remains. On September 29, 1918, General John Monash and 10,000 Australian soldiers achieved in 4 hours what the British Army had failed to accomplish in 4 years. They succeeded not through greater bravery, as British soldiers were undeniably courageous, nor through superior weapons since. They used the same rifles and artillery. They prevailed through superior thinking, careful planning, effective coordination of combined arms, open sharing of information, and trust in soldiers to adapt and improvise. The breach of the Hindenburg Line did more than hasten the end of the First World War. It proved that intelligence can triumph over rigid tradition, that preparation outperforms blind courage, and that treating soldiers as thoughtful individuals yields better outcomes than treating them as expendable ammunition. These lessons were paid for with blood on French soil. The tragedy lies in how many lives were lost before military leadership embraced them. The hope is that such lessons are never forgotten.